Sinister Secrets of 1863. The terrifying truth behind a cursed grandfather-granddaughter union. Lucy felt a chill crawl up her spine as lightning split the darkened sky. The old house groaned, its creaks and whispers echoing through the halls. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just beyond the shadows. Waiting. This wasn't the home she remembered. It was a relic of dread and whispers, filled with memories that tasted more like grave dirt than nostalgia. While sorting through dusty junk in the attic, Lucy stumbled upon a weathered diary, its cover fragile and worn. The moment she opened it, a rush of cold air swept through the attic like the breath of the long dead, suffocating and heavy. Words bled through time, detailing a fateful union in 1863. With each line, her heart raced. The pages hinted at a family curse, one that turned honor into betrayal and laughter into tears. She read about her ancestors, their secrets buried beneath the earth like bodies long forgotten. As evening fell, the house transformed into a labyrinth of whispers and shadows. Lucy heard soft voices echoing through the stillness, a frantic call of her name that froze her blood. Samuel, her grandfather, had become a shell of the man he once was, his once majestic figure reduced to frantic gestures and vacant stares. "It's not safe," he murmured, eyes darting around as if some unseen entity danced in the dark. "They watch us." Panic surged through her veins. "Who, Grandpa?" she shot back, fear coating her throat. Was it the townsfolk? The secrets? Her thoughts raced faster than her breath. She needed answers, desperately. Thrusting that diary into her bag, she ventured out into the night, the moon's silver light barely illuminating her path. A short distance away, she knocked on Mrs. Hartman's door, once her childhood friend's mother. A shadow crossed the window, then vanished. They were gone. Time and regret had warped the good people of this town into ghosts. The ache of loneliness twisted her gut as she approached Sheriff Collins's barn, the air heavy with foreboding. He welcomed her in, a thin smile stretching across his face that cracked with unease. But as she spoke, revealing her fears, his demeanor shifted. The sheriff's eyes widened, recognition flickering before he masked it with incredulity. "Just a figment of your imagination, Lucy. Old families, old stories, you know how it is." Something was off. The walls of the barn began to close in on her, shadows lengthening. She felt them creeping closer, too many sets of eyes watching her. Was everyone in Maplewood in on something she didn't know? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let us continue. The storm surged outside as she returned home, the winds howling in tune with her racing heart. Back in the house, shadows whispered her name, a cacophony of secrets targeting her sanity. Lucy found her grandfather muttering to himself, dark energy pulsing through the room like a living thing. "You must stop reading," he gasped, eyes wild in the erratic flicker of candlelight that seemed to dance in response. But she was determined. Clutching the diary tightly, confronting the truth became her only focus. The thunder crashed one last time, deafening, and the very walls around her screamed with terror. "The blood you bear is stained with more than honor," the chilling voice echoed, leaving her paralyzed with fear. As darkness swelled around, she realized she was no longer just caring for her grandfather. She was entwined in a battle against an ancient curse that held them both in its sinister grip. With ice coursing through her veins, she understood the horrifying task ahead: to unearth the truth and fight against the malevolence that threatened to consume them both forever. The air grew thick with tension, pressing down on Lucy as she clutched the diary tighter, her knuckles turning white. Shadows flickered, twisting grotesquely around her, blurring the lines between reality and nightmare. She was aware of the oppressive silence that filled the room, punctuated only by her grandfather's labored breathing. Each inhalation sounded like a warning, echoing the urgency of the moment. "I have to know," Lucy whispered to herself, her heart racing faster than the rapid flashes of lightning outside. She couldn't shake the feeling that the very walls were alive, watching, waiting. With trembling hands, she turned back to the diary, the flickering candlelight casting wild patterns across the pages. "By the time this ink dries," one entry read, "the darkness will have claimed another. The price of our blood is steep. Beware the children of our past." The warning sent a tremor through her. Was this about her? Could her family's tainted legacy reach out to her, dragging her down into the abyss of their mistakes? A sudden gust of wind howled through a cracked window, rattling the frame and eliciting a choked gasp from her grandfather. "Lucy, please." He lurched up, gripping her arm with surprising strength. "You don't understand what you're meddling with. It wants you. They want you." Panic surged within her. The shadows seemed to murmur in agreement, wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket. "Who wants me? Grandpa?" she demanded, desperate for clarity. Her voice felt small against the overwhelming dread. "The spirits of the past. They want to let you go. You must put it down. Bury it," he pleaded, his eyes wide, glistening with a fear she had never seen before. It chilled her to the marrow. But she couldn't put the diary away. It was a beacon, her only hope. "I can't, Grandpa. I have to finish. I have to know." As if summoned by her determination, a new wave of cold rushed through the room. The candle flickered violently before plunging them into darkness. Lucy's heart pounded in her chest. The shadows became thicker, coalescing into figures that writhed at the edges of her vision. Suddenly, a loud bang reverberated from the attic, breaking the silence. A cascade of fear shot through her, as if the house itself was protesting her intrusion into its secrets. "Stay here," she commanded, her voice a charged whisper, before instinct urged her to investigate. Each step toward the attic felt like an ascent to the gallows. The creaky steps echoed ominously as she climbed, breaking the heavy silence. At the top, she found the hatch slightly ajar, cold air seeping down, wrapping around her like icy fingers. Heart racing, she pushed it open. Inside, the attic was cloaked in darkness. The only light came from the jagged slits in the walls, where old wood was splintering. There, among the stacked boxes, lay a ghostly figure shimmering ethereally in the dark. It looked at her with hollow eyes, twisted features contorted in anguish. "Help us," it rasped, its voice a sad whisper, threading through Lucy's bones like poison. She stumbled back, heart hammering against her ribs, breath trapped in her throat. Then she remembered her grandfather's frantic warnings. These weren't just the shadows of the past, they were collectors, vengeful spirits yearning for release, and they might not be the only things lurking in the dark. She felt a presence behind her, heavy and unyielding. A chill swept over her as she turned slowly, dread settling like a stone in her stomach. "Grandfather!" Her voice trembled, but there was no response. Suddenly, she was engulfed in darkness, the attic's walls closing in, and she understood too late that some truths are never meant to be uncovered. What did she awaken? As she groped for a way out, an unearthly howl pierced the air, resonating deep within her core. Would she be able to escape the fate that awaited her? Lucy gasped as she stumbled blindly in the pitch black, her hands tearing at the air, searching for solid ground. Panic clawed at her throat, and she fought the primitive urge to scream as the keening wails of the spirits intensified, reverberating through the hollow space around her. They sounded desperate, like a choir of the damned, pleading for liberation or revenge. The attic felt like it was alive, weighty with sorrow and rage. Lucy could almost sense the malevolent force ensnaring her, its fingers curling around her heart. She squeezed her eyes shut tightly, forcing her mind to run through possible escapes. Adrenaline surged through her veins. The impulse to flee warred with the mysterious allure of the diary still clutched in her grip. "Help us!" The ghostly figure echoed in her mind, a haunting refrain that wouldn't let go. Taking a deep breath, she opened her eyes again, focusing on the faint outlines of the attic. She could see shelves stocked with forgotten treasures and old furniture draped in white sheets like ghostly figures in waiting. Shadows shifted, flickering at the edges of her vision, and she felt the weight of unseen eyes set upon her. Lucy! The voice was her grandfather's, suddenly piercing through the fog of terror. Get out of there! Now! But the spirit's cries melded with his, drowning his warning in a cacophony that tugged at her resolve. The tension inside her coiled tighter, battling against the instinct to obey. What truth lay hidden in the dark corners of this house? With renewed determination, she moved cautiously toward the spectral figure, heart battling the fear gnawing at her insides. What do you want? She called out, her own voice sounding strangely distant, swallowed by the shadows. What do you need from me? The ghost twisted, its features contorting in agony, and a shudder ran through Lucy as the figure pointed toward one of the boxes stacked haphazardly in the corner, a heavy, dusty chest that carried the weight of history, secrets yet untold. Suddenly, the room shook. The walls vibrated with a low growl as if the very structure of the house rebelled against her presence. The ghostly cries grew louder, losing their rhythm, becoming an unbearable shriek. Perspiration beaded on Lucy's forehead. In an instant of fervent clarity, she rushed to the chest, each step echoing with dread. With shaky fingers, she lifted the heavy lid, wincing as the ancient hinges groaned in protest. Inside lay layers of old cloth, bundles tied with fraying rope. Her heart raced, an instinct whispering the possibility of eyes on her back, watching, waiting. Before she could delve deeper, the air morphed to ice. The foul breeze swirled around her, biting at her skin. A voice, shrill and accusatory, cut through the tumult. You shouldn't have come here. You're doomed to suffer the same fate. Oh God! Lucy gasped, her breath fogging in the sharp cold. She recoiled from the chest, certain that whatever lay within was the catalyst for her family's curse. Interpretation of that truth was spilling through the edges of her frantic mind, but clarity eluded her in the chaos as the shadows lunged toward her like predatory beasts. She heard her grandfather's voice once more, laced with desperation. Lucy! Run! Heart pounding, she bolted, her instincts driving her back toward the hatch. The attic seemed to fight against her as she stumbled, the air thickening with every frantic step. Fingers of cold grasped at her ankles, dragging her down. Wails chased her, filling her ears until she was nearly deafened. Lucy! Just as she reached the edge of the steps, a heavy arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her back. She turned to find the ghostly figure inches from her face, its hollow eyes gleaming with an ancient pain. You cannot leave. You must help us. The darkness surged, collapsing in on her and swallowing her response. She was pulled into an abyss, gravity becoming irrelevant amidst a vortex of despair. What could she do? As her vision darkened, she fought with every ounce of her will. But was it enough to wrestle free from the chains of the past? Or was she destined to join the hushed whispers echoing throughout the shadows? What awaited her on the other side of this all-consuming void? Lucy's world spun, engulfed in shadows that pressed in from all sides. She gasped, desperately clawing for breath, feeling the cold tendrils of darkness wrap around her like a serpent. Just as despair threatened to consume her, she landed hard on the cold, unforgiving floor, the breath knocked out of her lungs. She blinked against the dim light, finding herself back in the attic, now eerily calm, the wailing spirits replaced by the haunting silence of dust settling. Heart racing, she scrambled to her feet, desperately searching her surroundings. The heavy chest still stood open, the old cloths spilling over, yet now they looked unremarkable, ordinary, even had it all been a nightmare. Lucy, a whisper ghosted through the air, sending a shiver down her spine. She whipped around, only to find the ghostly figure gone. Fear pooled in her stomach, and a deep sense of foreboding crept back in. Grandpa! She called, her voice echoing. No answered as she peered into the shadows. The air thickened, transforming the corners of the attic into unsettling shapes. Something inside her stirred. They were not just dark spaces but hidden memories or perhaps lost souls. A flickering light danced in her periphery, igniting her curiosity. She inched toward the chest, feeling the weight of the moment press heavily on her shoulders. What had she uncovering? And what if it was not just about finding out, but about confronting the sins of the past? Taking a deep breath, she knelt by the open trunk, the air around her growing heavier with an unshakable presence as her fingers brushed against the cloth. An icy chill swept through the room. The shadows flickered again, and suddenly, memory-like images filled her mind, visions of a ragged woman weeping, a man's angry face twisted in rage, a child cradled in sorrow. Each scene sliced through her like knives, unraveling the mystery of the family's curse she had unwittingly stumbled into. "Stop!" she shouted, wrapping her arms around her head as if that could block the flood of memories. "I don't want this," but her voice faded into the shadows. With each plea, the spectral scenes only intensified. The woman's wails echoed through her bones, the man's fury igniting a fire she could feel at her back. Lucy could see them, the lost souls trapped within the walls of her family home, forever tormented. "Help us," their voices synchronized, dragging her deeper into the abyss of sorrow. It was not just a request. It was a demand that coursed through her, urging her to unlock the truth buried in time. Panic boiled over, and she scrambled to her feet, heart pounding. "I don't know how. I can't help you," she screeched, staggering back. The light flickered again, forming into a doorway that had not existed before, beckoning her with a frightening intensity. The throbbing pain inside her head turned into clarity. What if the answer lay beyond that door? What if, just maybe, she could set them free? But what if she didn't survive whatever was on the other side? With every instinct close to flight, she found herself inching toward the luminous portal. The voices converged once more, a unified murmur growing urgent. "You must choose, Lucy." She hesitated, trembling. The shadows hovered, her heart drumming like a frantic bird in a cage. Would she confront the darkness or let it swallow her whole? In that split second, she realized she had an opportunity to unravel her family's deadly legacy. The choice hung in the air, electric and overwhelming. With one last glance back at the heart of the attic, the chest that had borne witness to so much, she took a step toward the glowing doorway, feeling its pull grow stronger. What awaited her on the other side? Would she become a savior or merely another lost soul? The moment stretched, the decision weighing on her as the air buzzed with ominous potential. "Lucy," the echoing wails urged again. "Don't turn back," and with that fervent plea echoing in her mind, she plunged forward into the blinding light, trusting her instincts to lead her through the unknown. Would she emerge unscathed, or was she stepping into an even darker nightmare? The blinding light swallowed Lucy whole, and for a moment, she felt suspended, as if time had frozen around her. The edges of her reality warped and twisted, unfurling like a flower's petals before the sun. Then, like a sudden tide, the light crashed down, and she landed hard on another cold, unforgiving floor. Gasping, she pushed herself up, trying to grasp the sudden change. This new space was dim, a long, narrow hallway stretching in both directions as fog rolled along its length like pale smoke. The air was thick, infused with dampness and the faint, lingering odor of decay. Lucy shivered, pulling her arms tight against her body as dread crept back into her veins. "Hello?" she called, her voice faltering, swallowed almost instantly by the oppressive silence. No answer, just the echo of her own fear snapping back at her like a rubber band. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, patterns obscured by dirt and shadows. A flickering light bulb buzzed overhead, casting a sickly glow that barely penetrated the darkness beyond. She took a hesitant step forward, her heart thumping wildly. Each footfall was like an alarm, reverberating through the stillness. Whatever had drawn her here felt ancient, primal, felt wrong. And with each step deeper into the corridor, the weight of unseen eyes pressing on her back grew heavier. "Lucy," the whisper was unmistakable, clearer this time, yet more chilling. She recognized the voice. It was her grandfather's. A shudder ran down her spine. "Grandpa?" she whispered, hardly able to control the tremor in her voice. She rushed forward but was met with an unexpected barrier, an unseen force that made her stumble back. Her hand brushed against the wall, and the sensation was like touching ice. Panic flooded her chest as she pressed her palms flat against the surface, desperate for connection, for answers. What was happening? Where was she? Suddenly, an image flashed in her mind, a glimpse of a fire, a desperate fight, and then a scream. The sound ripped through her, piercing the silence like a knife. Blood curdled in her veins. The horror wrapped around her tighter, the stench of smoke filling her nostrils. Lucy, you have to remember the voice again, but now closer. She spun around, her heart racing, scanning the darkened corners. Shadows danced like living things just out of sight. The air buzzed with tension, weighty and charged. Remember what? She shouted, tears threatening to spill. What do you want from me? The whispers grew louder, flooding her mind with urgency. The truth. Find the truth. Without warning, doors began to materialize along the hallway, splintered and weathered, their surfaces marred with dark stains that looked disturbingly like blood. A thin line of light peeked through the cracks, beckoning. One door stood out, its frame gleaming strangely in the dim hallway. She could feel it calling to her like a siren, promising knowledge, or perhaps more darkness. She approached it, fear mixing with curiosity. A rattle of the doorknob sent her heart sprinting. What lay beyond? Would it be salvation or doom? Would she confront her family's dark legacy, or would it bind her tighter to the shadows? A chilling realization washed over her. If she opened this door, would she merely walk further into the nightmare, or could she discover the truth that might set them all free? Eyes narrowing in determination, Lucy reached for the knob, heart hammering in her chest. The flickering light overhead sputtered ominously, and she felt the shadows close in around her. In that split second, she understood. The encroaching darkness was alive, eager to pull her under. And it all came down to a simple choice. With one frantic twist of her wrist, she yanked the door open, held her breath, and stepped inside. What would she find waiting in the room beyond? And would it finally unveil the secrets buried deep within her family's cursed past? The door creaked open, revealing a room submerged in shadows, the air thick with a stale, acrid stench. Lucy hesitated, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm in her chest. The flickering bulb outside barely illuminated the space within, creating shifting silhouettes that warped and twisted against the walls. She stepped through, the threshold feeling like a boundary she could never return from. The door slammed shut behind her with a deafening thud, making her jump. Panic began to claw at her throat. "Grandpa?" She called again, her voice trembling. A low groan echoed from the far side of the room, chilling her to the bone. She squinted into the darkness, desperate to locate the source. Dust motes danced in the small shafts of light, creating an eerie ballet around her. And then she saw it, a form hunched over in the corner. Lucy, the voice was soft, strained, and eerily familiar. It sent ice racing through her veins. With each cautious step, the figure came into view, her grandfather, his silhouette barely discernible through the pall of shadows. He looked older, worn down, his eyes glassy and unfocused. "Grandpa, what happened to you?" She rushed towards him, but an unseen force stopped her, sending her sprawling onto the cold floor. The air felt electric, buzzing around her, tangible in its threat. His head snapped up, and the moment their eyes met sent a jolt through her. His gaze was both pleading and fearful. He shook his head, mouth opening to speak. "You shouldn't have come. You don't understand." "Understand what?" The room felt like it was closing in. "Why are you here? What's going on?" "Lucy, you need to leave. They're watching." With frantic urgency, he pointed at the walls, shadows shifting unnaturally. Her heart raced as she scanned the corners, a deep sense of dread wrapping around her like a shroud. But the walls began to twist and writhe as if something dark was crawling just beneath the surface. Chills raced down her spine. The whispers returned, now clearer voices whispering her name, calling her deeper into the room, promising answers that felt like lies. "Don't listen to them." Her grandfather's voice strained under the weight of urgency. "It's like a trap. They want you, Lucy. Suddenly, the sources of the whispers came into view, forming dark figures along the walls, their faces obscured. They moved closer, seeming to blend into the very fabric of the room. Caught in a web of shadows, Lucy felt the air grow heavier, charge thickening with an unbearable tension. "What do you want from me?" she screamed, pushing against the unseen barrier that held her back. Panic surged, making her breath quicken. She needed to know, but fear clawed at her, curling tightly around her throat. Remember, the dark forms surged forward, reaching for her, faces now clear and contorted, mouths moving in a silent scream. They were twisted, grotesque, sipping on the fear that radiated from her very essence. "Lucy!" Her grandfather's voice broke through the cauldron of terror, snapping her gaze back to him. "You need to face them. You can't run from the truth." Bile rose in her throat, and she felt tears blur her vision. The shadows pulsed and writhed, and she realized they were hungry. Hungry for a secret buried deep, one tethered to her very soul. With a surge of raw energy, she pushed against the fear, her grandfather's words echoing in her mind. Face the truth, but at that moment, time seemed to slip as the shadows pooled around her. Would she drown in their darkness? Or could she unlock the power of the family secret destined to change everything? The room echoed with chaos, and she had to act fast. In a sudden surge of adrenaline, she lunged towards the darkness, ready to confront whatever twisted truth awaited her. What awaited her within that dark embrace? Could the truth set her and her grandfather free, or would it drag them into eternal despair? Lucy lunged forward, heart racing, engulfed by the suffocating darkness. The air crackled around her as the shadows clawed at her skin, thick and suffocating, but a fire ignited within her. The whispers swelled, a cacophony of long-lost voices echoing in her mind, each one laced with despair and longing. "Lucy, come to us, find us," they beckoned her deeper, a seductive melody woven with fear and promise. She felt their presence, their cold, skeletal hands brushing against her, pulling her further into the abyss. "Stop!" she shouted, the clarity of her voice somehow cutting through the gloom. "I'm not afraid of you." But her bravado wavered, the weight of the shadows pressing against her like a great stone. "Lucy!" Her grandfather's urgent plea echoed again, stronger this time. "You have to face them. You must remember." She hesitated, caught between the haunting figures and the fear of the truth. What was buried deep? What dark family secret had her grandfather protected her from? The walls of the room twisted and churned, revealing new forms, new horrors that twisted her stomach into knots. Faces appeared, familiar yet grotesque, warping into screams of terror that were all too real. Summoning every ounce of courage she had, Lucy took a step forward. "I will not be your plaything. Whatever haunts you, I will face it." With those words, the shadows halted. The whispers faded into an eerie silence, and the room pulsed with anticipation. The figures became clearer. Some looked like her ancestors, their features caught in a rictus of anguish. Others bore no resemblance, yet carried the same heavy despair. A tide of dread washed over her as she recognized the chilling connection between their fates and her own. They had all been shackled by the same unnameable terror, bound to a cycle of fear and despair that reached beyond time. Remember, the soft voice of her grandfather surged through the silence, weaving in and out like a thread connecting them all. "All that we feared, all that we lost, it ties us. You must unlock the curse that binds us." Suddenly, a flash of insight struck her like lightning. The symbols she had seen in her grandfather's old tomes, the stories whispered through family dinners, a ritual lost to time, a way to sever the chains binding their spirits. They had been trapped by a choice, one that stretched across generations. The dread that had always lurked was born from a single act of betrayal. Tears streamed down her face as the truth blossomed. "I can't," she cried. "What if it's too late? What if I can't break your chains?" Facing the truth is the only way. His eyes held hers, filled with a desperate love but also the weight of centuries. "We need you. Do it for all of us." As she deliberated, the shadows coiled tighter, hissing secrets that threatened to unravel her mind. Survival instincts kicked in. She had to make a choice. Gathering what remained of her dwindling courage, Lucy stepped closer to the pulsating darkness, ready to embrace her family's chilling legacy. But the moment she reached out, a shattering scream echoed, shredding the silence. It pierced through her, sending a wave of icy terror down her spine. "Lucy, don't!" A sudden, blinding light erupted, illuminating the room in a searing blaze. Lucy shielded her eyes, heart racing, pulse pounding furiously against the deafening cacophony that erupted around her. What had she unleashed? In that moment, as shadows retreated and the whispers turned to wails, she felt that the darkness was not vanquished. It was stirred, awakened, and hungering for one more soul to claim. Fearing the consequences of her choice, she gasped, the weight of truth crashing down. Was her family's legacy going to destroy them all? And in an instant of chaotic energy, the shadows closed in again, seeking to reclaim what they had almost lost, and Lucy was left with a single, terrifying question. What had she truly awakened? Lucy barely caught her breath as she blinked away the brilliant light that momentarily blinded her. The darkness reformed, creeping back from the edges and swallowing the glow, wrapping her in its chilling embrace once more. The air was thick with an acrid, sticky tension that made every inhale feel like breathing in ashes. "Stay back," she called, her voice trembling but fierce. The shadows responded, swirling and writhing dangerously close. They seemed almost sentient, hungry for her fear, for her life. Each whisper felt sharper now, blending into a maddening chant that vibrated through the walls. "Lucy, Lucy," the voices became frantic, gripping her heart with icy fingers. "Shut up," she shouted, desperation igniting a flicker of defiance in her chest. "What do you want from me?" As if in answer, a figure materialized from the darkness, its form indistinct yet terrifying. It hovered just outside her reach, face obscured by a hood that dripped shadows like a dark veil. Lucy's blood ran cold as it pointed a skeletal finger directly at her, an accusatory gesture heavy with the weight of ages. "Find the truth. End the cycle," it rasped, voice echoing like the rustle of dry leaves in a winter graveyard. Lucy's heart raced. The truth, it was buried beneath the dread, just out of reach. But could she bear to uncover it? What if that truth was worse than the shadows? Then she remembered her grandfather's face, the love mixed with dread, the legacy of pain that had haunted their family for generations. Suddenly, an image flared in her mind, a tattered journal filled with strange symbols, spidery notes about an ancient ritual. The gnawing urge to run surged through her, but instead, she stood firm. If this darkness was tied to her bloodline, then she would face it, no matter the cost. With renewed determination, Lucy took a shaky step forward. "I will find the truth," she declared. In response, the figure recoiled momentarily, but the shadows deepened. The whispers rose again, louder, more chaotic, drowning her every thought. "You cannot know. You cannot remember." "Yes, I can." A newfound strength fueled her. "I must discover what binds us." The shadows twisted violently, spewing out grotesque images her ancestors, twisted in anguish, caught in a web of torment, never free. Each face distorted, screaming silently, a reflection of the fear that had gripped her family for centuries. "Lucy, you mustn't tea," a voice urged, choked with desperation. It was her grandfather, appearing beside her in the ethereal glow of pain and shadow. "It's too dangerous." She met his gaze and saw the terror in his eyes. "I can't let this continue." The darkness surged, a visceral wave crashing into her, pushing her back. Lucy stumbled, heart racing, fear clawing to take hold. Was she strong enough to face the truth? Would the sacrifice be too great? Then came a low rumble, as if the ground itself quaked in discontent. The shadows rippled and twisted violently, pulling back as if recoiling from the light she had summoned within. "Do it, Lucy." The plea from her grandfather now sounded fierce. "You are the key. You must finish what was started." She felt their anguish like a cold hand around her heart, wrapping her in layers of despair. The echoes of their pain thrummed through her veins and stirred something deep inside. The symbols from the journal flashed in her vision. Once more she had to accede as she reached for the void, grasping for the knowledge that could shift the very fabric of their curse. A piercing scream split through the air. The shadows twisted back, collapsing around her, and she felt herself being pulled into an unthinkable rift. Lucy! Her grandfather's voice resounded one last time, vibrating with an urgency that echoed the depths of her family's sorrow. You have to remember or we will all be lost. Terror gripped her anew as she plummeted into the depths of darkness. Had she unleashed an even greater horror? The shadows coiled tighter, and as they consumed her, she faced the terrifying realization that the truth she sought might lead to an end far darker than she could. Ever imagine what if I can't come back? She thought, grappling with the darkness. And then silence fell like a heavy curtain, leaving her with the undeniable question echoing through her mind: what sinister truth lay ahead in the abyss? The darkness howled around her, thick and suffocating. Lucy felt the very fabric of reality twisting and unraveling. Time slipped away, and she could no longer tell if seconds had passed or if she was lost in an endless void. The swirling blackness held her in its grip, pulling her deeper, making her limbs feel heavy and remote. The chill was absolute, biting into her bones as her thoughts raced and collided in her mind. Images crashed around her like waves, flashes of primitive rituals, desperate faces, and the laughter of children turned to screams. She was no longer just an observer. She felt their anger, their pain, their desperation clawing at her consciousness. It was as if their memories were woven into the very threads of darkness. Lucy, you must remember, the voice echoed like a distant whisper, blending into the cacophony of wails and laughter. It felt familiar, but also alien, a reminder of something she had tried so hard to forget. "What are you?" she cried out, her voice trembling, filled with both rage and fear. "You are the key." Shadows formed shapes, faces, words, jumbled mingles of her ancestors' past, each revealing bits and pieces of a fragmented history she didn't understand. "You need to find the book. It is the only way to break the curse." The book? Panic surged through her. The weight of it pressed hard against her chest. Her grandfather's journal. But what did it hold? Would it guide her through this nightmare or plunge her deeper into irretrievable darkness? "You must hurry." The shadows grew impatient, swirling around her like a vicious storm as waves of despair thundered against her resolve. "Show me," she screamed, the determination burning bright, overpowering the fear that nipped at her heels. And just like that, a fissure opened in the depths, revealing a flickering light, a small glimmer of hope cutting through the suffocating void. Lucy lunged toward the light, stretching out her hand as the darkness clawed back, trying to pull her in. Tumbling out of the abyss, she landed hard on a cold stone floor. Her breath came in jagged gasps, and the air tasted stale, like dust and decay. Shaking off the remnants of her plunge, she glanced around. Faded wallpaper peeled off the walls, once vibrant patterns reduced to a memory. It was a room she recognized. The library from her grandparents' old house, dimly lit yet hauntingly familiar. Books lined the shelves, their spines cracked and worn. And there, in the far corner, sat a small table with a single leather-bound journal. The very one her grandfather had kept hidden for years. Lucy, the voice caressed her ears again, soft and pleading. "Open it." With trembling hands, she crossed the distance. Each step felt heavier, every heartbeat pulsating with an urgency she couldn't ignore. Shadows flickered at the edges of her vision, whispering taunts, threatening to devour her joy if she failed. She hesitated, breath hitching in her throat. Deep within her, a cold knot of dread tightened as she understood the truth would not be easy. "What if I'm not ready for this?" she whispered to herself, staring at the journal that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. But the shadows weren't patient. They writhed and twisted, slinking closer, their whispers now maddening. "Lucy, now!" With one final breath, she lifted the journal, fingers brushing over the worn cover. The world fell silent. With resolute determination, she opened the journal, and the words spilled forth like a broken dam: secrets, ancient rituals, bloodlines intertwined, and frightening truths that had been submerged for far too long. As the pages turned, a chilling wind swept through the room, extinguishing the light. The darkness surged. "Welcome back, Lucy." A voice, familiar yet terrifying, echoed through the void, reverberating in her soul. "Who is there?" Her throat constricted as she turned, but the shadows closed in, cloaking everything in inky blackness once more. Lucy's heart thudded furiously. The echoes of the past began their dance again, a macabre waltz of horror that promised to reveal everything she feared. "What happens if I cross the lines written in these pages?" she thought, filled with both curiosity and dread. And then, a guttural laugh broke through the silence, a sound that felt alive, tangible, and filled with malice. "Find out, Lucy, your fate is woven into the very fabric of this darkness." The chilling realization sank deep. She was just at the beginning. And what would it take to break free from the curse? Would she be lost forever? The darkness swirled around Lucy like an angry storm, clawing at her heart and mind, each breath a battle against the suffocating air. Shadows writhed and curled, beckoning her to succumb to terror, but deep within her, a flicker of courage ignited. The darkness might want her, but she refused to be a pawn in the horror that had plagued her family for generations. With a surge of defiance, she focused on the journal clutched tightly in her hands. The words she had read blurred together in her mind, intertwining with the ghostly whispers of her ancestors echoing back at her. "I will find a way," she murmured, determination lacing her voice. She could feel the hungry spirits, the essence of her cursed lineage surrounding her, pressing closer, but fear was no longer her chains. The air split with a sudden scream, piercing through the fog, mingling with the warnings of her grandfather. "You must remember what you've forgotten." His face came to her, aged yet filled with warmth, love entwined with desperation. "Show me," she shouted to the void. "What do I need to do to break the curse?" Just as the shadows surged forward, their grasp tightening around her throat, a flash of light erupted from the pages of the journal. They illuminated the room with an ethereal glow, pushing the darkness back momentarily. She could see now the figures of her ancestors swirling near the edges, their faces twisted in agony, yet carrying a hint of hope. Lucy stepped into that light, letting its warmth engulf her. The journal's words whispered the beginnings of a ritual, a way to confront the darkness without succumbing to it. She began to recite the incantation, each syllable weaving through the air like lifeblood, fierce and unyielding. "Spirits bound by blood and sorrow, hear me now. Release the chains that bind you to this darkness. I stand as witness and bearer of truth. I demand release for you and for myself." As the incantation flowed from her lips, the shadows quivered, recoiling from her voice, unraveling like threads pulled from a tapestry. Each word resonated through the walls of the room, shaking the very foundation of the legacy that had burrowed into her family's bones. The air thickened with energy. Memories rushed through her, flashes of her ancestors, young and filled with hope. Their laughter morphed into terrifying cries as betrayal seeped into their hearts. The truth of the curse became clearer. The pain and suffering were rooted in a single act of betrayal that had chained their spirits for centuries. "Lucy," her grandfather's voice rang out, stronger now, cutting through the chaos. "You are the key to their liberation and your own." Strength surged through her. "I will not let your pain continue," she declared fiercely, the words swirling in the thick mist. "I will free you." And with that, the final line of the incantation poured forth, a crescendo of will and defiance. The shadows erupted, shrieking as tendrils of light fanned out from her, swallowing the darkness whole. The cold, clammy grip around her thawed, loosening its suffocating embrace. The voices of the lost began to harmonize into something beautiful, a song of release that echoed through the very essence of the house. The atmosphere shimmered, the darkest corners filled with light and warmth. The screams faded into sobs of relief. And then they emerged, visions of her ancestors, their faces softening, the weight of anguish lifting as they were bathed in the glow of her bravery. "You did it," they whispered, a chorus of gratitude woven into the light. Their forms, once twisted and distorted, transformed into serene silhouettes, free at last from their torment. Suddenly, Lucy felt a hand on her shoulder, grounding her. Her grandfather stood beside her, his form radiant, smiling through the tears that glinted in his proud eyes. "You've broken the cycle, my child. You faced the darkness and you brought the light." The shadows evaporated into mist, dispersing into the corners before disappearing entirely. The air cleared, the weight lifting from Lucy's chest. She had confronted her family's darkest secrets, faced the malevolence that sought to chain her once more, and emerged victorious. With trembling hands, she closed the journal and realized what she had to do next. "We can turn this place into something good," she whispered to the bright room that now shimmered with the spirit's love. "We can change this legacy into something warm, filled with laughter and hope." As dawn broke outside, sunlight spilled through the windows, illuminating the dust motes that danced like tiny stars. It was a new beginning, one free from the pain of the past. With one last glance at her grandfather, a tear rolling down her cheek, she whispered, "Thank you." She felt a warmth envelop her, the love of her ancestors surrounding her one last time. As she stepped outside into the new day, filled with potential, Lucy understood that while the past would always be a part of her, it no longer had the power to haunt her. She could finally breathe free. Now it's your turn. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next thrilling chapter of exclusive stories. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm, and flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about Lucy's journey. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion, because only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.